who is the facilitator for our program accountability implementation team. That's the team that is responsible for all of the grant application products and review. The topic of today's call is the Part C and Part C grant award packages that were just posted today on grads, and I also sent them out to probably to everybody who's on this call. Also with me, kind of assisting today, is Jennifer Barrett-Vitkus, who will be helping us make sure things go smoothly and to alert us to any questions that come up in the chat. If you do have questions, how would you like to do questions after the first section and then after the B section, Jennifer?
That's
yeah. So the sequence today is we're going to start off with the memo, and these will be things that apply equally to both Part B and Part C applicants. Then Jennifer will move into walking you through the requirements for the Part C application process. We'll then take any questions that you have. After responding to those, we'll then do the same thing for Part B with the question session at the end. Today's call was delayed by 1 week. It's typically the second Thursday of the month, but we pushed it back a week so that we could have all the application materials available to you and posted at Grad 360 prior to the call. So that should all be there. I think that's it. Thank you for joining, and we'll go into our content. Jennifer?
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. This is our first TA call for 2019, so I hope everyone is having a good start to the new year. I know here in D.C. we're getting prepared for potential winter weather starting tonight, so we have a lot of anxious folks who are ready to go home and get prepared for what's to come. In any case, saying that, I just want to remind everyone that this call is being recorded, so if for some reason you have to leave the call early, you can go back and listen to the session at a later date. Okay, let me go to our next slide. And let me start by just talking about the application due dates for Part C and Part B. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask my colleague Jennifer to see why my computer appears to be frozen.
Oh.
If you notice in the application memo that Greg sent out today, the due dates for the application are listed on the first page of the application memo. So for the Part C memo,
there we go.
And the Part C application package, that due date is May 3rd, 2019. Thank you, Jennifer. And for the Part B application package, that due date is May 17th, 2019. These dates are actually close to the due dates that we had for the 2018 application. So I hope there aren't any surprises here with the dates that we are suggesting. I want to remind you that as part of the submission of the application, you have to remember that we need the original copy of the document with the wet signature and any supporting documents sent to the OSEP mailing address by the due date. So supporting documents could be things such as policies and procedures that you're submitting that are either new or revised that OSEP needs to review, or they could be documents to support any responses that you were required to give for activities related to specific conditions. In any case, all of that should comprise your grant application package, and they should be sent in the original form with that wet signature to us by the due date. Now, we can't require you to use next day mail. However, we strongly recommend it, and that is because if you send things through regular mail, then they don't come to us directly. They go to another facility where they're scanned for anthrax before making their way to us. And unfortunately, that process could take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. In addition, when we do get the documents, they come to us distorted. So sometimes the pages are crinkly, the text is unclear. So we strongly encourage you to use next day mail. In addition to submitting the original documents to us, you do have the option to also send us an unofficial copy. And that unofficial copy can be sent to us via the OSEP application email address. And those addresses appear on page 8 in the Part C memo and page 7 in the Part B memo. All right, next we're going to move to public participation, because now that you know the due date for the application, then the next thing you want to be concerned about is when you have to publicly post that document in order to meet the public participation requirements for the department. Now, page 7 of the Part C memo and page 5 of the Part B memo, we have the information for public participation. And as a reminder, public participation applies to your application document itself and any new or revised policies and procedures. One thing to keep in mind is that when we're talking about public participation, we're talking about a 60-day time frame where you have to publish the entire application for at least 60 days prior to the date that is due to OSEP, and you must allow 30 days for public comment within that 60-day period. If you are also revising policies and procedures, those must also be involved in the public participation process. And again, as part of that process, you have to publish those policies and procedures for at least 60 days, accept comments for 30 days, and also have hearings. And when we say hearings in a plural, we mean just that. So it should be more than one hearing, preferably 2 different areas in the state, to ensure that your stakeholders have ample opportunity to participate. OSEP no longer requires you to send us evidence of public participation, but we do ask that you hold on to that documentation, because if we were to engage in monitoring activities with you, then we might request to see that documentation at some point. So make sure you keep that. Given the due dates for the applications, then the dates you want to keep in mind for public participation are the following. Your Part C application package should be posted no later than March 3rd, 2019, and your Part B package should be posted no later than March 17, 2019. All right, one thing I want to speak about briefly is conditional approval. Some of you received conditional approval for your 2018 application. And if you're not sure if that applies to you, then you want to check the first paragraph of your 2018 grant application letter. In that paragraph, if you received conditional approval, it will say conditional. If you did not receive conditional approval, then you won't see that language in your document. Okay, typically states that get conditional approval do so because they have a response of no and a date in Section 2 on the Part C application, or a response of no to assurances in Section 2 on the Part B document. Prior to the submission of your application, while your application is publicly posted, OSEP checks those postings to get a heads up as to the type of approval you're seeking with the application document. So there may be an instance where we will circle back to you to check on the status of any policies and procedures that caused you to have a conditional approval in 2018. In addition, we will try to figure out if there are any remaining issues that need to be resolved and get a status update on any policies and procedures that are still in the revision process for your states. Most of the states that received conditional approval in 2018 were on the Part C program side as opposed to Part B. However, both programs could have circumstances where conditional approval may have been granted. Another thing that's universal to both the Part B and Part C process has to do with the use of funds section of the document. When we're talking about the Part C program in particular, with the use of funds section, this is the section where you give us that budget information. Also, this is where you talk about any costs that might require prior approval from OSEP based on uniform guidance. This is the section in the memo, on page 4 of the memo, where we talk about any special instructions related to participant support costs. And this is also where we tell you how you can submit any request for prior approval with your grant application or via another process. I'm going to open the application memo now to this section just so that we can look at it briefly. Just one moment, if you bear with me. Okay, so this is a document that Greg sent you today, and this is a document that has all the pertinent information about due dates, about particular areas of the application, template, and so forth. So if we go forward to page 4, this is the section where we get information related to the use of funds. So I want to draw your attention to the information about participant support costs, which appears on page 5 in this section. Okay, and the top section of the document talks about those costs that require prior approval, and in this paragraph you see a reference to participant support costs. With our 2018 document, that was the first opportunity where we gave guidance to states about how they could denote for us that they had participant support costs with their application and request approval for those. So I just want to refresh your memory about this guidance and make sure that you read this area of your document. And also, too, I want you to take note of a tool that we give you a link for within the paragraph that will facilitate your process should you need to seek prior approval for participant support costs. So that information is here in the application memo for Part C. The rest of the application memo for Part C goes into detail about the other parts of the application document. Sections 4 for Part C, where we get into indirect costs, public participation, which I've already talked about, and then the information that I referenced earlier regarding where you can send your application documents. In a similar fashion, we have the Part B memo structured in that manner. And let me just click to that one. So with the Part B memo, the first page, similar to the Part C memo, you get your due date on the first page. If you go through, it refers to different parts of the application template. Information about maintenance of state financial support, you want to make sure you read that because that's critical for the Part B process. Talks about the use of funds section and how that's unique for Part B, references to the interactive spreadsheet. And just like the Part C memo, we have information here too about participant support costs and a reference to the tool that you could use should you need to request approval for participant support costs and want to do it with the application. You do not have to make that request for approval of participant support costs with the application document. It can come in after that. It could also come in prior to you expending money for those purposes. However, we do have some states that have a sense as to how they want to use funds and how those funds meet the definition of participant support costs. And so if you choose to ask for approval with the application, that is an option you have. Okay, now I want to go to more details about the description of use of funds for Part B. I've already made reference to the interactive spreadsheet. That is a critical component of the use of funds section for Part B. And this year, fortunately, we have the 2019 allocations available, and that information has been sent to you today. so you can populate your 2019 interactive spreadsheet and send it in with your application document. In addition, I want to remind you about certain state-level activities and expenses that require prior approval, so make sure you read page 4 of the application memo for Part B. We've already talked about participant support costs. Those instructions are there on page 4. And again, you can request prior approval with the grant application itself. One other unique feature with the Part B process has to do with the year of age cohort for FAPE. Many of you may recall that a few months ago, Greg sent an email to all states with a document requesting you to look at the age ranges in which you provide FAPE in your state and confirm for us if our information was correct or if we needed to make a correction. Many of you provided updates for us, and so we created an updated document which was sent out today. And we ask that you look at it and let us know if there are any additional corrections that need to be made. And if so, make sure you share those corrections with your OSEP state lead so that we in turn can share it with our Budget Services Office, and they can make sure that the allocation information for your state is correct based on that information. Now what I'm going to do next is look at the actual application templates themselves. And I'm going to start first with the Part C program. So I'm going to ask those of you with Part B programs to just be patient for a few minutes. And what we're going to do is look at the actual document and go into the submission statement. So this is the front cover of the application template for Part C. And if we go to the very first page after this cover, we have Section 1, the submission statement. And this is a critical portion of the document because this tells us the type of approval you're seeking for your Part C application. If you're seeking full approval, you put a check mark next to Section 1A, number 1. And full approval denotes for us that you are not saying no and a date to any assurance in Section 2A of your document. So when you're completing this page, you want to make sure you remember there's a relationship between this page and Section 2 of the application template. The responses on this page should correspond with the responses you give us on Section 2. So if you check full approval, again, we anticipate that you will have on-file responses or new or revised responses to your policies and procedures in Section 2A. And we'll look at that in just a second. If, however, you're applying for a conditional approval, which means that you are requesting conditional approval because you need additional time to make revisions to policies and procedures, then we would expect a response in Section 1A, number 2. And also we would expect to see a date in the no column in Section 2A of the application template. So either 1 or 2 should be a response in Section 1A. In addition, if you are submitting policies and procedures, you would also give us a response under Section 3, or Item 3, I should say, in Section 1A, Item 3. Now, if you received a conditional approval last year with your 2018 document, then we would expect a response in Section 1B, conditional approval for a current grant year. That means the grant year that we are operating under right now, FFY 2018. If we receive full approval in 2018, then you would not give us any responses here in Section 1B. So Section 1B applies to those that receive conditional approval in 2018. And here you want to look at the various options that you can give us for responses. So Section 1B, number 1, applies if you gave us a particular response to assurances last year. And your options are to either tell us that you completed all of your assurances in your grant letter, or to tell us that you still have some issues that are outstanding. That will determine if you give us a response next to B1 item A or B1 item B. If we carry over to the next page, You see we have an option 2 here under section 1B, and that typically applies to those states that receive conditional approval for other purposes, for other circumstances. In some instances, we have states that had to work on additional requirements, and for that reason, they have to give us a response here, and they denote that they are attaching the documentation to satisfy those requirements. Here again, if there were unresolved issues related to things other than Section 2A, then there's an option for letting us know that, or if documents are being attached, that can be specified too. If you have any questions about completing this section, please reach out to your OSEP state lead, and they will in turn work with a member of the program implementation team to make sure you get the appropriate response to your inquiry. Section 2A is the area where you tell us what's happening with your policies and procedures. If they're on file for Part C, then you have an X here under yes, OF on file. If you're submitting something to us as being revised, then your X would be under yes, R for revised. Or for something completely new, then you also have the option under yes, N for new. Otherwise, if it's a situation where you need more time to make a revision, then we would expect to see a response in the no column and a date no later than 6/30/2020 in this column. And that's specified here in the instructions above the section, and that's also denoted in the application memo. Areas that are grayed out are areas where we don't expect to have a response from you. Okay, so don't feel the need to have to put something on top of those gray areas. That means that in the instance of question number 1 here, you see no is not a response that can be given. Either the name of your state lead agency is on file, or it's a situation where it may be changing because of lead agency change, and you would denote that for us. Okay, so if you see a grayed out area, then that means that we don't expect a response in those areas. Let me quickly move past this section and go forward. And so this is just going through all of the assurances under Part C. And you can see some of them are quite lengthy, particularly the one dealing with transition, Section 2A10. And then we'll get to the section where we're talking about your certifications and the all-important wet signature. Okay, so this is Section 2B, additional assurances where either yes or no responses are applicable. And here again, if there's a no response, you have to give us a date by which you anticipate being able to satisfy that response. We'll get to the certification section, and then with the signature page, there are a couple of things I want to emphasize, because unfortunately we have to have a lot of states resubmit because of errors with the signature. Certifications, here you see yes is the only option for a response. And the signature page. Give us the name of your state lead agency, or state, I should say here, the official and the name of the lead agency. Okay, and we give you an area where you can print that information. And then make sure it's signed and make sure that the date is complete. Unfortunately, we have to have a lot of states resubmit because of issues with the date. Either it's the wrong year or something's wrong where we don't see a month. It can be a whole host of things, or the date is just not there, period. Okay, so you want to make sure that that information is there. And then you get to use of funds, Section 3, which we've talked about briefly already. Okay, Section 3A, where we're talking about the use of your federal funds for the lead agency and for your ICC. And so as you remember, we collapsed these charts last year. So you give us the ICC and lead agency information on one chart. Then we move on to activities of the lead agency and the ICC. And this is the area where you can denote for us under prior approval needed any expenses that would require prior approval from OSEP, including things that might be participant support costs. However, keep in mind by making a check mark here, it just denotes for us at OSEP that we need to be in contact with you to get more information about what it is you're flagging for us. So if you are putting an X next to an item that you anticipate to be a participant support cost, you still have to go through a process of getting formal approval. However, by putting a check here, it just tells us that this is something that you believe meets the definition, and then we can circle back and confirm that with you. Beyond this section for Part C, we get into direct services. This is where we ask you to delineate for us how you're using your federal funds to pay for direct services. And so give us a description of each of those EI services if you can. If there are any activities by other state agencies, so for some of you this is applicable, for others it is not, then you would denote that here. If you use your funds for other purposes, such as serving at-risk children, then we have a page for that within Section 3. And then we have the totals. And what I want to emphasize here is that you be careful with your numbers, because a lot of times we have states transpose numbers here from the different sections within Section 3 when trying to put those figures on the total page. Also, if your state charges indirect costs, then we would expect that that dollar figure would appear here as well. In addition, we would expect responses in the indirect cost section of the document, which is immediately following. So Section 4, you tell us if you have a system of payment, and then if your state does charge indirect costs or has a cost allocation plan, then you would denote the particular circumstance that is applicable to you. Now, in previous years, we would only have states that were not ed leads complete this section. So our health lead agencies would be primarily the ones completing this section. However, as a reminder, I want to make sure you understand that all states, regardless of lead agency, should be giving us a response here. Okay, and the responses continue on to the next page. Okay, I'm going to stop briefly here to see if there are any questions about the Part C document before I move to the Part B document. Jennifer, are we showing any questions?
Not at this time.
Nothing's come up.
All right, let's move on to Part B. So we're going to go to the Part B application template. And the first page after the cover page is similar to what you saw with Part C. First page is Section 1, the submission statement, where you can tell us the type of approval you're seeking. And just as with Part C, for Part B, you have two options. You can tell us if you're seeking full approval, meaning that all of your policies and procedures meet the requirements of Part B, and so you do not have any no responses in Section 2. Okay, if that's the case, you're seeking full approval, which most Part C states seek every year, so you would have a response next to item 1. Or if you cannot assure that all of your policies and procedures meet the requirements, and you're going to put a date in the no column next to something in Section 2, then the response option would be Section 1A, item number 2, which would denote for us you're seeking a conditional approval. If you're including policies and procedures with the application, then you would also give the response under item 3 to denote that there are attachments with your document for policies and procedures. As with the Part C document, Section 1B is similar for the Part B program. So if you had conditional approval last year, then you would give us a response here in Section 1B. If you had a full approval last year, then we anticipate that you would not have a response here under Section 1B. Okay, so there are very few of you that received the conditional approval within the Part B program. However, if that applies to you, then just as with the Part C program, read all the responses here carefully. Section 1B, Item 1, refers to conditional approval based on the assurances, and you're either telling us that you have completed all of the issues that were tied to that conditional approval, and you're giving us the documentation for it, or you're telling us you didn't complete all of the issues. If you had conditional approval for other reasons beyond your responses to the assurances, then Section 1B, Item number 2, would apply to you, and you will look at the responses here to see which one is the one that's applicable for you. You're providing the documentation of completion of the issues. You're attaching the documentation, or you're telling us that the issues haven't been completed. So either you previously gave us the information, you're attaching it now, or you're telling us it hasn't been completed. And then Section 2 for you looks slightly different than it did for Part C, because here your yes column is a very narrow column. You don't have to tell us if something is new, revised, or on file. You just give us a response under yes, that you're giving us assurance that the policy or procedure is consistent with Part B. You give us a response under no to tell us that you need more time or something is inconsistent, and you give us a date in the no column for that information. We hope one day to be able to modify the Part C application so that it mirrors Part B, and in that regard have just the simple yes and no responses for the assurances as Part B has for theirs. With the Part B document, you have some additional assurances. Here again, the only response is yes. You have certifications similar to what Part C has, with responses only yes. And then same thing with the signature page of Section D, where you give us the name of your state, the official who's signing your document, name of the state agency, the official's printed name, signature, and date. And here again, same reminders about the original signature and date. And then we move on to your Section 3, which looks very different from Part C for your use of funds, because the critical part of your use of funds process is that interactive spreadsheet, which you need to include. And because Greg has sent that to you now, you have the 2019 document, then the 2019 document is what you should include with your application. And also when you publicly post your Part B application, you should be posting that 2019 interactive spreadsheet. If you have difficulty finding your state-specific document, please let your state lead know so that they can provide you instructions on how to find your particular document. So you should not be populating the generic interactive spreadsheet, but instead should be accessing your state-specific document within the document that Greg sent you today. In addition, I want to draw your attention also to the area in the box here where it talks about describing the process for getting LEA input on the distribution of amounts among activities in your interactive spreadsheet. Make sure you provide us with that description. We have had circumstances where states have omitted that information. Also, I want to remind you about Section 4, State Administration. This is the area where you tell us if you have any state-imposed rules and regulations that are outside of the federal requirements, and if so, you give us a list of what those are, or you tell us that you do not have any state-imposed rules or regulations outside of the federal regulations. So it's not sufficient for you to just say not applicable. It's not sufficient for you to just reference a list that was in a previous application. If it's the same list that you provided us with in 2018, then we want you to give it to us again. If this section is not applicable for you, then we want you to give us a statement saying that here in Section 4. And then if we go on to Section 5, Maintenance of State Financial Support, this is an area where we recommend that states confer with their fiscal officials to ensure that this is completed accurately. And also this is another area where we need to have a signature from a state budget officer or one of their designees, and we need to have a date. If there are any issues with this section of your document, then a member of our fiscal implementation team will be in contact with your state for further information. Also, too, this section of the application template is described in detail in the application memo for Part B. So you want to make sure you refer to that document prior to completing this section if you have questions. In addition, we give you a link to one of our TA centers that we refer to as CIPHER, and that is a TA center that works with states around fiscal requirements related to IDEA, and they have staff there that can provide you with assistance in completing this section and provide you with TA. Okay, so for the Part B document, that is the end of the template. You don't have additional sections beyond this. And that concludes the presentation on the application template for Part C and Part B. So this time we'll check to see if there are any questions about the information that I've shared with you today. Right now we're not showing any questions here. Tara, if you're on the line, I'm just going to ask you to double check to make sure we're not missing anything.
No questions have come in.
Okay, well, I just want to remind you that this call has been recorded and we will post this information on GRADS. Also, too, we can make the slides available if you find that that will be helpful. So that's something else that we can post. And please reach out to your OSEP state lead if you think of something as a result of this presentation or after actually beginning the process of completing your documents. If you run into any difficulty, reach out to your OSEP state lead and we're here to provide that technical assistance for you. We look forward to receiving your 2019 application documents, and we will be in touch again soon.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that very thorough and informative walkthrough. As Jennifer said, if you have specific questions after you get into submitting your, entering your information into the application template, please contact your state lead and we'll get back to you as soon as possible with responses. Couple things coming up. First of all, you probably don't need to be reminded, but I'll remind you anyway, that February 1st is that special day when the SPP APR is due through the GRADS 360 platform. So this is your FFY 2017 submission. Everything will be due except for the State Systemic Improvement Plan, that's indicators B17 or C11. As we have done in past years, we are delaying submission of that until April 1st. So please keep those two dates in mind. Also coming up in February, we have a special Valentine's Day OSEP TA call. As it happens, the second Thursday happens to be February 14th, which is the day I proposed to my wife all those many years ago. On that call, the CSIP and NCSI will describe the relationship between implementation science and improvement science, which are pillars of the State Systemic Improvement Plan implementation and evaluation process. So I think that's a very timely call as you're finishing up your submission for the FFY 2017 SIP. I think that about wraps it up for today. I want to thank Tara Luber from AIR, who's assisted us with this call today and made sure things went smoothly. Thanks to Jennifer Simpson and her work group, her team, for all the work that they've done to make these application packages available to you. and thanks to Jennifer Barrett-Zitkus, who is here providing technical assistance and moral support to us. So I hope everyone has a good day, and we'll be talking to you again in February. That concludes our call.